Thanks for joining, everybody. Hope you and yours are safe and healthy and are all getting appointments for the COVID-19 vaccine, which is now available to Floridians 16 and older. And hopefully a vaccine for younger kids will soon be available. I know those are in testing right now and development. So we're live on Zoom and live streaming to YouTube. Thanks for joining us however you're able. I'll introduce our friend Derek Demeter, who we just saw a brief 14 months ago in our in-person events, and we're glad to have him back. And he'll talk today with us about astronomy misconceptions on nerdy t-shirts. So I got my nerdy t-shirt, but I don't have an astronomy one, so I may have to do some shopping after today's talk. But before that, a reminder that if you're catching this event on YouTube, you can join us in the Zoom for these events live and in person. To get that login info, go to our meetup group and we'll share that link now. That's at meetup.com/CFL Freethought. You can join us there and be sure to RSVP for upcoming online events and put them on your calendar. This event is part of a recurring educational event session that we've taken online back in March of 2020, and we'll continue to do these as live stream Zoom events and YouTube events as well. You can find all of our past educational events and follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/CFL Freethought. And if you want to be sure to get monthly emails reminding you of upcoming activities, go to tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/CFFC newsletter. Give us your email address and any other contact information that would help us stay in touch with you, and we promise to do that. Of course, we hope you are already following us on Facebook, where we post a lot of news and events and a lot of online events right now. We know that some of you may be tired of that, but others of you are really enjoying connecting with folks around the country and around the world. So we have been posting those on Facebook pretty regularly. We saw a big batch today as well. Of course, we hope you're already following us there, but we're at CFL Freethought if you want to find us on Facebook. So just a couple of things before we begin. I want to make a couple of quick announcements. And first, thanks to everyone who pitched in on our Green Up Orlando event yesterday. There were about 20 of us who volunteered to plant a few hundred native plants at Bill Frederick Park at Turkey Lake. Special thanks to Foundation Beyond Belief for the Humanism at Work t-shirts. And that was in lieu of our regular monthly park cleanup events at Quaney Park and Castleberry, as well as the Trailhead and Winter Garden. We'll pick those up again in May, hopefully both of them, definitely the Quaney Park in May, after taking this month off for the event in Orlando. And next, I want to be sure to let you know about our Secular Week of Action event, which is also being done as part of the One Orlando Alliance's Acts of Love and Kindness initiative. And I'll say those again: Secular Week of Action and the One Orlando Alliance's Acts of Love and Kindness initiative. So this year marks the 5th year of remembrance in the Pulse nightclub tragedy of 2016. And we're honored to be a part of this initiative this year for the first time. The CFFC is preparing hygiene kits to support Central Floridians in the LGBTQ+ community who are in housing distress. Our goal is to prepare 150 of these kits for a donation to the center, a service and support organization here in Orlando. And we need your help to do that. Thanks to those of you who have pitched in to help so far. We've got a lot of donations in, including some cash that we're going to use to purchase more supplies to fill these kits up. We're about halfway towards our modest goal of about $1,500 of donations in materials or financial support. So when we figured out how much we needed, it was about $1,500 to get the project off the ground, and we're about halfway there right now. So we've got a number of supplies that are already in, and we've got some monetary donations that have been very helpful. There's two ways that you can help us out: either directly donating to the CFFC through PayPal. All the donations received during this period of fundraising will go towards this project. You can use the link tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/CFFC support to donate directly to the organization one time or on a monthly basis, however you like, but any donations received during this fundraiser will go to this project. Or log on to Amazon. Okay, if you shop on Amazon, log into Amazon before you click on this link, tinyurl.com/CFFC-Amazon 2021. I'll say that again for those on video, but you can see that in the chat. That's tinyurl.com/CFFC, and CFFC is all caps, hyphen, and then Amazon, capital A, 2021. So go to Amazon and then click on that link, and then you can purchase supplies that we have picked out that are perfect for this project. And if you don't change the shipping address, they will come right to us, and they will be assembled at a volunteer event that is almost full right now. So we're not pitching for volunteers at the moment. We want to get those packages put together on the 2nd of May, and get them into the community the following week. So that's our goal, and we really would appreciate your help making it there. The deadline to donate or to have supplies delivered is April 26th. So the next several days is crunch time for us. Lastly, before we begin today's event, be sure to mark your calendar for our next educational event. That's 2 weeks from an hour ago. 2 weeks from an hour ago. So the usual time is 3 p.m., but this event next time is going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll say that again when we get done as well, but 2 p.m. Eastern on May 2nd, we'll meet the newly incorporated Association of Secular Elected Officials. So we're looking forward to that. I'll mention that as we finish up today as a reminder. So if you're with us in Zoom today, we'll move on to the intro. If you're with us in Zoom today, your microphone will be kept on mute so you don't accidentally interrupt the presentation. And if you have your camera on, that's great. Just please try to avoid any distractions. You can find the chat option at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a computer, if you're on a mobile device, just tap the screen and it'll appear as an option, and feel free to chat with us over there. And chat is where we want you to ask questions today. So put those in there and we'll get to as many as we can. And with that, I'm going to take a drink and we'll get started. So Derek Demeter has spoken with us 4 times. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to say, if you've spoken with us 4 times, you don't get a full introduction, because we'd much rather hear you talk because you're that good than spending a lot of time talking about who you are. But the last time we saw Derek in person was when he came, I think it was January 2020, and he did his 3rd presentation for us, if I've counted correctly, at the University Club of Winter Park. Derek is a friend of the CFFC, a friend of us as individuals, and a great guy who is very passionate about astronomy and about education. So he has the perfect job, and I think he loves it. He is the director of the Emil Buehler Planetarium at Seminole State College, and he is also very actively involved in astronomy as a pastime, as well as a professional educator. He enjoys bringing kids and families and all kinds of people into the planetarium under normal circumstances, as well as out into the field where he sets up telescopes. He does photography of space, and we've been out there with him before on that. It's a great time. Derek's a great person to know. So if you can follow the planetarium's Facebook page or get to know Derek and kind of see what he's doing, you will learn a lot, not just about astronomy. I hope he'll talk about some of his other passions here as we get going today. So Derek, welcome to the CFFC, or I should say welcome back.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Jocelyn, and everyone else here today. So as David mentioned, my name is Derek Demeter, and some of you probably already ran into me at some other meetings, but if you haven't, again, I run the planetarium at Emil Buehler at Seminole State College, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of what's coming up with us. We do actually offer virtual programs for the planetarium right now. We actually have several others that are coming up here, so I will put those event pages in the chat later on after the talk. And then also we are hopefully reopening in the fall of this year. So hopefully, we'll hope to be able to see you all soon. And just another mention is that we have received a partial funding of $150,000 to upgrade the planetarium to some really amazing technology. We have to raise the additional 50% of the money to get us to where we want to be. We're also in the process of getting a portable inflatable planetarium dome that we can go and take to areas, especially areas that are in need, in low-income areas, as well as rural areas that can't access the planetarium's facilities. And we're also upgrading a whole new classroom dedicated to not only astronomy, but also the earth sciences. So for those that know me, I also collect fossils, I collect rocks, I'm big into geology and history and biology. So we're actually going to incorporate a lot of that into our programming as well. So we're really kind of expanding. So hopefully when we reopen again, we'll be able to offer a lot more than what we have been in the past. We've been offering a lot, but we're going to be offering even more. So what I'm going to talk to you all today is I did a program with the Smithsonian for their International Star Party a couple of months ago, which has been really, really, really cool to be able to do these programs to such a large, wide audience. I think that's the silver lining for COVID. I'm trying to think about, what's amazing that came out of this horrible situation. And I would say connecting with people that I would never have been able to connect with or be able to reach in normal circumstances. So this has been one of the more positive situations dealing with COVID-19. So again, I like to look at the silver linings of everything, and I'm very happy to be able to continue on and doing what I do, whether it be physically or on virtual. So this talk I'm gonna give today has to do with t-shirts, and the reason why is because this actually happened. This was before the pandemic started. I could travel all over the place, and I noticed that there were people coming to special events and things like that wearing nerdy t-shirts, and being a critical thinker, being in somebody who thinks about, okay, wait a minute, that t-shirt isn't really accurate, and I don't want to be that know-it-all actually kind of person, but at the same time, when you see that, you're thinking to yourself, well, if you're going to sport a nerdy t-shirt, we have to do a little bit better job at making sure that the information on the nerdy t-shirt, while be funny, also actually tells a more accurate detail of what's going on. Because as an astronomer, one of the biggest issues with teaching astronomy this day and age are people that are really, really, really passionate and upset about the whole Pluto situation. And that's what I'm going to talk mostly about today. I'm going to throw in some other funny things too, but that's pretty much the extent of the presentation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. So here we have, I'm actually also going to turn off my video just to kind of conserve my bandwidth here. What matters is you all see what's on the slides, not necessarily me. So this is actually the t-shirt that I saw. This is the t-shirt I saw. It says, "Rest in Peace, Pluto, 1930 to 2006. What is the context of this t-shirt? I started asking myself. Well, when we think of the word, or we think of the acronym RIP, or Rest in Peace, we think of something has died. Something has usually with living things, something has been deceased, rest in peace to a family member or to a pet or whatever. And of course, the dates here showed up 1930, when Pluto was apparently discovered, to 2006. And apparently, does that mean that in 2006, Pluto was destroyed? Did Pluto disappear? Was Pluto gone? Unfortunately, as I think the intent of this t-shirt was to imply the fact that it's no longer a planet, it really creates a lot of confusion. And I think that's going to also domino effect the confusion of what's going on with Pluto. So what I wanted to talk about today is the process of how Pluto became basically this 9th planet to what it is today as a dwarf planet, the largest of these dwarf planet objects that we have in our solar system. And, throw in this funny idea, the fact that there's a nerdy t-shirt that says "Rest in Peace, Pluto," which doesn't really make any sense from an astronomy's point of view. So anyway, so here we have a family portrait of the solar system, not a very accurate one. This is also on a t-shirt as well. This is a print you can get done on a t-shirt. I have seen this one on a t-shirt before as well. It shows, here we have the sun. Sun has a camera taking this lovely picture of the solar system, though none of the planets except for Earth actually, well, Saturn actually looks pretty legit too, but Earth and Saturn are really the only ones that look fairly legit. The other planets, you don't really know which one's one's Uranus, which one's Neptune. Does Mars, why does Mars have these weird swirling, anyways, my head's exploding. Mercury doesn't look anything like Mercury, it's cute, but look at little Pluto. Oh, look at little Pluto. Pluto's so sad. Why isn't Pluto part of the portrait? Why isn't Pluto part of his family portrait? Well, the intent of this t-shirt is basically the fact that Pluto doesn't belong to the major planets. You don't belong to those major planets anymore, right? Well, here's the thing, though, is the solar system has, no pun intended for our group here, evolved. As it evolved in our understanding of the solar system, we have learned a lot more. In fact, in this family portrait, we should include Pluto as well as Eris, Sirius, Haumea, Maki Maki. They should be smiling in their own little group over there. Hey, how's it going? We should also include the millions of asteroids. Some of them are amazing in this family portrait. Don't forget the comets that are lurking around in our solar system. There's a lot more. Our family portrait is much bigger than those major planets. But of course, think about when you went to school. When you went to school, you probably most likely learned that there were 9 planets. You probably might even remember that my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas, right? Of course, now it's my very educated mother just served us nothing. Okay, well, I don't know. But here's the thing. The planets have always been there. Pluto's always been there. And we have to look at the process of changing our view of the solar system. And when we propagate these kinds of ideas of the fact that Pluto no longer belongs to the solar system anymore, it doesn't really give us a big picture, no pun intended, because that's what we're having in this picture. We're not seeing the big picture and the extravagance and the amazing aspects of our solar system. So again, this nerdy t-shirt, while it'll be funny, it's not doing us a favor when we're trying to educate and provide the right information for our for our generations. Now, okay, so 2006, something happened. All right, 2006, I'll actually explain the organization that actually changed Pluto's status. But Mike Brown, this is Mike Brown here. He's a Caltech planetary scientist, and Mike Brown is a pretty impressive dude. He has spent a lot of time looking and discovering new worlds beyond Pluto's orbit. He's discovered several other smaller objects we call trans-Newtonian objects like QR and Sedna. He's discovered several other dwarf planets like Eris. And in fact, his discovery of Eris around this time, a little bit earlier now, around 2003, was essentially where we start getting into this whole situation with Pluto. And Mike Brown is not shy with the idea of being the Pluto Killer. Yeah, Pluto Killer. He loves the idea of being known for the person who basically killed Pluto. And he even has a background in his Twitter showing the Death Star blowing up our little Pluto. Now, disclaimer, that didn't happen. All right, so don't cry. Don't start getting super upset. Don't start that Pluto is still there. Pluto's awesome. Just Mike Brown's being silly. Mike Brown is the Pluto Killer, and he's happy about this idea of being the one that basically made Pluto no longer a planet. And other people like Neil deGrasse Tyson followed in with writing books about Pluto not being a planet anymore, including that in Hayden Planetarium, no longer being a planet. But the thing is that this is where it all started. This is where this whole controversy began around this time in the mid 2000s, where we see the emergence of essentially Pluto no longer being a major planet. Well, here's another nerdy t-shirt I've seen too. Dear NASA, your mom thought I was big enough. Love, Pluto. That's another thing that happens a lot in the astronomical world. NASA is an amazing organization. We have just landed another robot on Mars, including the first ever helicopter on Mars. That is pretty awesome. Perseverance and ingenuity. NASA is also working on the Artemis mission that will send humans to the moon, including the first female astronaut on the moon. Exciting stuff. We're eventually going to go to Mars. NASA does some pretty cool stuff. However, NASA is not the reason why Pluto is no longer a planet. And unfortunately, NASA kind of gets the scapegoat issue. It pretty much is blamed for everything regarding space. Doesn't matter who did it, NASA gets blamed. So unfortunately, because NASA is so big, so famous, everybody knows about NASA, NASA gets the blame. But in reality, NASA was not the real reason why Pluto became what it is today. So when we see shirts like this isn't really telling us this true story of how Pluto became to be. So again, when somebody claims that they're a nerd and they like to be super scientifically accurate, that leads me to open up into the idea of, okay, I'm going to have to scrutinize your t-shirts here because you're gloating about your nerdiness. So it opens up a total Pandora's box for this kind of stuff. So what organization was actually the organization that basically turned Pluto from being a major planet to being a dwarf planet? It is this fraternity. No, it's not a fraternity. It's not a sorority. This is the International Astronomical Union. And the International Astronomical Union is the only organization, I want to repeat that, it's very important because I'll tell you all in just a minute here. The International Astronomical Union is the only organization in the world, hence the international part, that can actually designate things in space. They can name asteroids, comets. They can identify stars. They're the organization that decided to divide the sky into regions we call constellations. Everything that has to do with the heavens above, the International Astronomical Union is the one that actually officially designates it. Why is this a big deal? Well, I see this a lot in the planetarium. People come up to me and say, hey, my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, gave me a star for my birthday. This is awesome, right? You got your own star. We're going to point it out in the planetarium. This is all fun and games. This is awesome. It's a great gesture of love. However, the thing is that technically that star is not your star. The International Astronomical Union, unless they did, which can happen, if you discover an asteroid or discover something, you can get it named on whatever you want. And one day I'm going to discover an asteroid, because I'm still a child. I want to call mine the flying poop monster asteroid. So people will actually say that when, like, incoming, the flying poop monster. Anyways, the thing is that the International Astronomical Union is the one that has to officially approve it. And if it's not, which a lot of these companies that sell these name a star programs, they actually don't get approval from the International Astronomical Union. So unfortunately, as endearing as it is, those stars that are named on those catalogs are not official. And usually they're so dim that we can't even see them with our naked eye. We have to use a telescope. And even that, you got to be under dark skies to really be able to see it. So again, something just to keep in mind. I usually don't bring this up a lot. But with this audience here, I think you all would appreciate that about the importance of talking about these things. So the International Astronomical Union is the organization that actually made Pluto a dwarf planet. And it was actually done in committee. And who was the head of the committee? Mike Brown. Mike Brown was the head of the committee. And if you've ever been in charge of committees or been part of committees, you know that there's a lot of bias that go on in those committees. And in this case, with Mike Brown being the head of this committee, he had a little bit of say in how the committee would agree. Therefore, Pluto was recategorized. But there are some importance to this. And I'm going to go into the semantics of a planet later on anyways, where a lot of this stuff is just, well, simply semantics. And we shouldn't really get too upset about the fact that Pluto is either a big planet or a small planet. It doesn't really matter from the grand scheme of things. Now, we have actually gone to Pluto. And in fact, we know more about Pluto than we do the big planets Uranus and Neptune. In fact, Uranus and Neptune have never been visited by another spacecraft since the late 80s with the Voyager 2 spacecraft. New Horizons, which is this thing here, it's about the size of a grand piano, made a flyby back in 2015. I know it seems like forever, but it's still fairly recent. And for the first time in human history, we were able to get back real, true, high-definition images of Pluto. We have learned an extensive amount of information about Pluto from this flyby, and has opened up our understanding of this little world. And I want to really stress the idea that even though Pluto has essentially been designated as a dwarf planet, It is an amazing place. This is Pluto Today. This is an image taken of the New Horizons spacecraft. It's been colorized a little bit to allow for us to kind of tell the different layers, different things that we have on the surface. So this isn't a true colored image. This is an enhanced colored image, but it gives you a depth that is absolutely amazing. Now, I'm going to keep this picture here of Pluto up, and I'm going to talk a little about what makes a planet, and what makes a dwarf planet a dwarf planet. Well, there are 3 rules that, according to this International Astronomical Union Committee, agreed upon and basically passed and now basically recategorized Pluto as a dwarf planet. Excuse me. The first criteria is that the object must orbit the sun. Well, we can probably all agree on the fact that Pluto orbits the sun. Nobody here hopefully thinks that the Earth is in the center and everything goes around the Earth, right? Okay, good. So Pluto orbits around the sun. It orbits around very slow, by the way. It takes 256 years just for Pluto to go around the sun. Very slow orbit, or very long orbit, whatever how you want to put it. Here's the other second criteria. It must have enough mass to have a gravitational attraction to produce a round shape. This is another thing. Nobody here is a flat Earth person, right? Okay, good. Because Pluto is a big ball, big round object. And that means that so far Pluto falls into the planet category. Well, this is where the third criteria changes Pluto's status. An orbit must have cleared any competing objects for dominance. What that means is that, for example, Earth, back 4 billion years ago, competed for dominance in its orbit with a little object called Theia. Theia hit the Earth, and essentially that collision produced the moon. Well, all the other major planets have basically cleared out their path of big objects in their orbits. Planetary scientists think that there would have been probably close to 20 planets in our solar system, or planetesimals, or smaller objects orbiting around the sun, but essentially got either destroyed or they recombined with another planet, or they were knocked out and were disintegrated. Basically, the solar system we have today is the byproduct of all these collisions and interactions with these objects. Well, Pluto actually technically shares the orbit of Neptune. So according to the International Astronomical Union, since Pluto shares its orbit with another planet, it technically does not really qualify as its own planetary body. The other thing is that Pluto and the other objects like Eris, Sirius, and all of those all fly into an area known as the Kuiper Belt. And the Kuiper Belt is basically leftover junk that basically didn't have enough gravitational attraction with one another to form other objects in the solar system, and Pluto's part of that whole big mess out there in the depths of the solar system. Well, that basically is what made Pluto a dwarf planet. All the other dwarf planets follow the same exact definition, at least according to the International Astronomical Union's definition. Another way that I like to describe this, and I just did a program similar to this with a library, is imagine you're a librarian and you discover a book that has that shares a lot of the characteristics of other books, but just seems different. Well, let's say you discover the fact that this book is mostly fiction. So you might put it into the fiction category. Well, let's say 20, 30, 40 years later, you discover several other books that have these exact same characteristics. It doesn't really share a lot of the characteristics with other books except for this group. Well, as a librarian, you probably would want to create a new category to fit these books into place. And that's essentially what they did with Pluto. They did with Eris. They did with Sirius. They did with Haumea and Maki Maki. They put in a new category called dwarf planet. One of the misconceptions that I get a lot about is, why did Pluto get demoted? And that's a term that I don't necessarily like to use. The Pluto didn't get demoted. We didn't demote Pluto. To some people, I guess it is, because it went from being a major planet to being a dwarf planet. When it comes to science, we have to think about the fact that when we look at things, when we discover things, when we find more and more evidence that leans a certain direction, we need to update our system. And that's what we did with Pluto. But even so, the word planet has changed since many of us went to school. Planet, by definition, is basically an object that orbits around a star and not another planet. That's a moon. Well, the word planet is kind of like the word mammal. Okay, mammal. Could it be a human? Could it be a chimp? Could it be a dog, a cat? Could it be a platypus? We don't know. We need other definitions to describe. We need species, we need genuses, we need other things that help us categorize and make the fit better, right? That's exactly what we did with planets. The word planet now is kind of the big, broad word like mammal, but there are rocky terrestrial planets or metallic planets like Earth. There are gas planets like Jupiter and Saturn. There are ice giant planets like Uranus and Neptune. And of course, there are dwarf planets like Pluto. So what we have done to the solar system is we have actually categorized things much more accurately now to the characteristics of those planets. And again, Pluto fits its category much more accurately than it did before. So science evolves, no pun intended, right? Well, don't let, again, the word dwarf planet fool you. Dwarf planet, or beside, Pluto is an amazing world. Let's take a look at some of the interesting things we've learned about Pluto since New Horizons made its way. Well, first things first, this thing that we're looking at right here, this is called Sputnik Planum. This right here is a large, giant, massive frozen nitrogen glacier. And the consistency of this frozen nitrogen is that of Jell-O pudding. And since it has a very kind of viscous, jello-y type viscosity to it, it actually drifts and moves and slowly creates these very intricate shapes, almost like a scalloping shape to it on the surface. It's really amazing. But the other thing that we discovered is that there is uplift on Pluto. What do we mean by that? Well, just like here on Earth, when we have plates interact with each other, they might uplift or push things up, causing ridges like we have with mountain ranges. Well, we have the exact same thing that happens on Pluto. Well, we have this glacier here, and what's happening is that we think that there's a plate here that's pushing up this ice. Yep, we have large mountains, large giant mountains on Pluto that are actually made up of solid water ice. So think about in your head, visualize a mountain like one of the Rocky Mountains out west or some massive like the Himalayas. Imagine that made up of solid, pure ice, water ice. I think that is truly, truly impressive. Now, what's causing, we don't really know 100% the mechanisms that are causing a lot of this, but we think it has to do with the fact that Pluto shares its center of mass with an object called Charon. Charon is actually almost the size of Pluto. And some scientists will actually even call it a binary planetary system, not just one like Pluto and its moons. We actually think that it could very likely be Pluto and Charon and the four other moons that go around Pluto, Nix, Hydra, and all, and Styx, and all these other ones. And so these mountains are, we think, that are being caused by this gravitational interaction with Charon, and that's actually causing the interior of this planet, this dwarf planet, to change there. Now, one of the other things that's really, I think, is actually really cool about Pluto is it actually contains this tar-like material on the surface called tholins, and this particular area is called the Cthulhu Regio. Yes. If you are an H.P. Lovecraft fan, you would love Pluto because there's some really interesting names from the various different elder gods found on Pluto, including Cthulhu. And this area here is really interesting because we find that in these objects way out in the depths of the solar system, these tholins contain amino acids, it contains hydrocarbons, and all the other ingredients necessary for life. And we think, we scientists believe, or not believe, think, based on evidence we looked at in the outer solar system, is that during a time in the early part of the solar system, 4.5 billion years ago, maybe 100,000 years after that. There's this era of time called the Great Bombardment. Pieces all around the solar system were floating around. They were hitting planets. The moon has a lot of evidence of that because of all the craters. Mercury is another site where we see a lot of craters produced from this Great Bombardment era. And we think that these tholins, which were actually developed in the outer solar system, actually seeded the Earth with all the organic material necessary for life. So some scientists would say that life actually, or at least the ingredients for life, originated from the depths of the solar system. So could we have been cometary or these kind of small objects, the material necessary for that? That could very likely be the case. And these tholins have actually helped us understand the biochemistry or the organic chemistry of the solar system. And we find that a lot of this stuff is in the outer solar system. Most of the moons outside in the orbits of Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and are all made of this very similar stuff. And this is really incredible that we could potentially have had the ingredients for life come from the depths of the solar system, maybe even from parts like Pluto. So could life exist on Pluto? There's a chance. Probably some type of microorganism, some type of extremophile might have developed on Pluto, which would be really, really neat. The other thing is that Pluto has cryovolcanoes. Yes, frozen nitrogen geysers or volcanoes, and that actually lifts up this nitrogen, vaporizes it, and eventually forms a nitrogen atmosphere. When New Horizons flew past Pluto, it looked back and saw this beautiful nitrogen atmosphere on Pluto. And just like Earth, our sky is blue because of the nitrogen in our atmosphere. Pluto's sky will glow blue as well. And some people have asked, well, what would it be like to be on Pluto? Well, if you're standing on Pluto at noon, okay, so if you're actually at noon on Pluto, the sky would be similar to about 30 minutes after sunset. So next time you go out on a nice clear day, wait about 30 minutes after sunset, look up, and essentially that's what the sky would look like at noon on Pluto. It's very dark on Pluto, very, very, very dark. You're not going to get a lot of sunlight being about 2.5 billion miles away from the Earth. So again, but you still get a little bit of that nitrogen. So this was a longer exposure, by the way. So in order to get that nitrogen glow there. So regardless of how you look at it, the point of this is the fact that Pluto is this amazing place, and regardless of how you look at it, it's it's still a planet. It's still a dwarf planet. It's still an amazing place to discover. And we could look at the history and secrets of life from places like Pluto. So, but, when we look at these nerdy t-shirts, we have to think about, we keep provocating this idea of Pluto being demoted, of Pluto being removed. Rest in peace, Pluto. We're robbing ourselves of the intricacies and the beauty of these objects way out in the solar system. And really, we need to tell their stories and stop, giving this idea that Pluto is not worth sharing anymore because it's not a planet anymore. And thankfully, though, most of the younger kids that I'm teaching at the planetarium don't really give a crap whether Pluto is a planet or not. They think it's awesome. And it's really generally the adults, especially my age and older, that have a problem with this. So I like to think that this will all get kind of corrected over time as, we kind of no longer a part of this world anymore. And but it is also important that that my job is to help inspire not only kids, but also adults in knowing it's okay for change. And it's okay to celebrate these changes, and this will lead us to a better understanding of our universe. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about this for a little bit. This is just a little bonus item here. I'm going to talk about this planet real quick. It's really not a misconception. It's just people always ask me, why is this planet called Uranus? Why is it called this name? People, and no matter how old you are, you could be a 90-year-old individual, you can be a 10-year-old individual. And every time you hear Uranus, there is a part of you, either it's inside your brain or it's outside, that you have to chuckle. Why, oh, why did we call this planet Uranus? Well, here's the thing. no matter how you look at it, you're going to find it on a t-shirt. You're going to find it in a joke. You're going to see anything. But, technically the International Astronomical Union has designated, probably because they're just tired of it being called Uranus, has actually made the proper pronunciation as Uranus. But if you look at the original Greek phonetics, it's Uranus. So if you want to be really super, nerdy, you want to say, look at Uranus. But you're gonna look. People are gonna look at you really funny, and that maybe that's something you like to do. But technically, Uranus is still okay. You can still call it Uranus, but the astronomy community kind of wants to get away from that because we're trying to be serious here. All right, I'm trying to be serious, folks. Trying to be serious. That's also a star too. But anyways, you know what I'm getting at here. So where did this name come from? Why do we call this world this planet? Well, it actually was discovered by some British people. William Herschel and his sister Carolyn Herschel. They had this. There's me. I think I'm wearing the exact same T-shirt I'm wearing at this here. So no, folks, I do not have one T-shirt. Okay, I wear multiple T-shirts. It just I just really like the band Opeth. Okay, it's a really, I like metal music. That's the way it is. But this is actually a replica of the reflector telescope that the Herschels used to identify Uranus. So Uranus was actually not known to the ancients, so it was actually discovered using a telescope. William Herschel noticed that this object was moving in relationship to the stars. Stars don't just kind of wander around on a daily basis or a monthly basis. They kind of stay fixed. They do drift, but it takes a very long time to notice that. You're not going to notice it in the short period like you do with planets. Well, so therefore he was astronomer royal, and he went over to the king and said, "Hey, King George, I love this. I discovered this new world. What should we call it?" Well, King George said, "We're going to call it George." Yeah, that's actually what William Herschel designated Uranus. Uranus was designated as the Georgian star, or George. Now, let me ask you a question. When you think about it, you're thinking, okay, so we got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, George. George doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? So for eventually the international community decided that maybe George was a little biased towards the British and just doesn't have the same ring to it. So why don't we go with the more classical approach? We have the Latinized names of Mercury, Venus, etc. But unfortunately, there's really no Roman or Latinized version of Uranus. It's actually Uranus. And where did Uranus come from? Why do we use Uranus? Why is that one after Saturn? Well, it actually has to go back to ancient Greek mythology. Before we have the Olympians were ruled by Zeus and Hera. They were in Mount Olympus. Well, their parents were the Titans, Kronos and Gaia and all these, right? Well, the father of Kronos, which, by the way, the Latin version for Kronos is Saturn. The father of Kronos was Uranus, which was the god of the sky, the god or the titan of the sky. So technically, Uranus is Saturn's father, and and Jupiter's father was Saturn. So that kind of is how Uranus got its name, was from this lineage there. So that's kind of why we call it that. So people always, there's a lot of people that ask me, why do we call this planet that? I mean, couldn't there be better names? Well, there's actually a reason for the madness, if you will. So that's kind of where we get the term Uranus is from this. But I just thought that I saw that as a t-shirt one time. I'm like, I'm going to add this in there because I get a lot of people that ask me all the time about why Uranus is called Uranus or Uranus. So there you go. So that's that. You have a little bit of a bonus on why we call this planet Uranus. So now you know. So anyway, so that's kind of what I had today for you all. So thank you so much for having me out today to present to you all. Here's some of my information about, so real quick here, again, I'm the director of the Emil Buehler Planetarium. We have an Instagram page, Seminole Planet. This is actually not true. I'm lying. I need to fix this. That was my old Instagram handle. My new Instagram handle is Derek the Discoverer. All no weird, no underscores or dashes or anything. Just Derek the Discoverer. I actually post a lot of my astrophotography. I post my adventures where I look for fossils and rocks and go explore. I'm a very big explorer. We also have a Facebook page, Seminole Planet, and our website information is www.seminolestate.edu/planet. And this Friday coming up, the 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we're doing a program on the or the night sky of Lakota. We're doing a story. We're actually I'm inviting two of my friends from the planetarium community, and we're going to be talking about the astronomical understanding of the Lakota people in the Midwestern part of the United States. And this is also going to be done on Zoom. If you go to our website here, you can actually find the Zoom link and the registration for it. It is required to register for it. But we'll have that at 7 p.m. And we have another program on May 14th called The River of Heaven, which is about Asian astronomy because it's Asian and Oceanic Heritage Month. And I have a friend of mine who will be hosting that program. Her name is Catherine Hunt. She is with the Ingram Planetarium in North Carolina, and she has a great program on all that. So I'm looking forward to presenting some of these for you all, and hopefully get to join us. And we'll be hopefully reopening again in the fall. So again, I hope to see you all. But let me know if we have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we do have a few here. We are hoping some folks on YouTube jump in with questions, and if you've got questions in the chat, drop those in there. We'd love to get them, but we do have a few here. So just a couple of comments on the presentation today. That was fantastic. I think it's been a while since we've talked about Pluto and why things change. So it's a good refresher, particularly for us science nerds. And there's always a spectrum of appreciation for jokes, right? Whether let's just take offensive jokes off the table and just talk about jokes that aren't offensive, right? So when you look at the joke of that T-shirt, it's like you've got on one end the science education and the other end comedy, and there's a spectrum of viewers, right? And the miseducation is what I think you're concerned with, and I think rightly so. One of the things that I like to say is the smaller the bumper sticker, the less information it conveys. So the less words you can use to describe something, the more you need to use a lot of words to describe something if you want to do it well. But not always the case for getting a laugh. Science education and comedy don't overlap enough. That's for sure. We've been out to the planetarium before. I think we've been out, personally as individuals, but also we used to have, I think a couple of times we've invited people to come out as part of a meetup with our group. It's been a while. I think it's time for us to plan another one. So let's definitely talk about that. On that note, as far as what you've been doing, sounds like you've got a guest speaker coming into your world. Have you done a lot of talks in the last 12 months? I mean, have you been Zoomed to death or what?
I've been Zoomed to death. I've lost count how many Zoom programs I've given. And I was actually using Zoom way before the pandemic. So it was an easy transition for me. I was invited by the Smithsonian, part of their International Star Party thing. I loved the fact that we can collaborate with people. I was part of Dr. Sian Proctor, who's actually going to be an astronaut going to space soon, on her Snacks and Cosmos program. Lots of different other school programs. I've been able to give school programs not only to schools here in Seminole County and Orange County and locally, but I've been able to give programs to schools in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Idaho, South Korea, India, all over, Australia. So it's been a really fantastic way for us to provide good science and good fun science to people and individuals that we normally couldn't really easily give programs to. So I'm definitely going forward with, once the pandemic is officially over and we can get back to kind of being in a more normal situation, having this opportunity to do virtual programs is still going to be a great asset for us to have, because our mission, of course, is to provide the as much educational opportunities as we can to as many people. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. So, but yeah, it's been great.
So I think a lot of us, particularly in the secular community, we've talked about after we are as done can be on on the way out of the COVID era, what we're going to do with this technology and the platforms that we've used, and we've kind of cultivated audiences, and we're going to lose people if we don't stick with this somehow online. But you have a little different animal, I guess, to work with, because you have a significant draw in your planetarium. You talking is great, but you talking in the planetarium is way greater. So it's definitely a draw that you won't lose. Whereas us and others, where we just have somebody come on and talk, I mean, you do the same thing for us in person as you do online, certainly much more complete and dynamic in person, and you're a great speaker. But we're definitely struggling with, wanting to make sure we hold on to the relationships with people we've developed in Zoom in the last 12 months, and some people from a long way away, and the need to bring people in, right? Not just to get to know and grow the social aspects of our community, but also for donations and supporting the community. It's, giving content away is, I think, the kind of short way to say that. And that's something that we're not afraid to do. But we certainly don't want to lose sight of the bigger missions that we have to build social communities here. And it's hard to do that from a long way away. But congratulations on all that. And a question in the chat is, will the presentations that you just pitched be available afterwards somewhere? Have you recorded any of these for consumption?
So we have a YouTube channel as well, Seminole Planet. Everything is Seminole Planet. So if you can just remember that, you're good to go. But we actually do record our programs. We wanted to originally to kind of go with what you're saying, David, that we were originally doing everything on Facebook Live, and eventually, when we got the access to the webinar feature of Zoom, where we can kind of make it more of a show, we wanted to kind of give more exclusivity to people, make them feel like they're actually seeing a show, but we're still recording them. We're still going to upload them to YouTube. So those programs will be available to people once we get it. But the benefit is seeing it live, asking questions, those kind of things are the benefit. But if I can add just a little bit to what you were saying earlier, David, about the thing about virtual is, one of the things that we've been doing that's been very successful is our virtual star parties. A friend of mine and we set up our telescopes and we show people things through the telescope that way. What I would think would be great in the future is hybridizing, doing live events, but for example, offering a live stream during that time, so that way you can keep those relationships. Because I agree with the same way, is that, having that personal relationship with people here locally is great. But if you built, I have people watching from Australia now to get excited when we, do stuff. Having that live stream aspect and stuff will I think hold those people that are out of the. So those tools have become more, have been more affordable, more easy to use. Before the pandemic started, doing this live streaming stuff was a pain in the butt.
There was a whole lot of learning that happened in March and April last year. We were involved in that fray as well. So what's your favorite Nerdy Science t-shirt, whether you own it or just saw it?
The thing is, so I want to, people always ask me, well, Derek, you must hate Star Wars, right? You must hate Star Wars. And I'm like, no. I don't have any problem with stuff that is obviously not trying to be scientific. For example, I only give issues to things where they're like, this is the most scientifically accurate thing ever and stuff like that. Then I'm like, okay, the gloves are on, it's time. My favorite nerdy t-shirt is actually NASA meatball with my brother actually made this for me for Christmas present. It's the Back to the Future car flying through the thing. It says 88 miles per hour, and it's fun, And I like shirts like that where you can be kind of fun. It's a good conversation starter, and it's not trying to be serious about it, So I think that's where it is. I think when you see those shirts, it's like, how serious, this is just having fun. So that to me is more the kind of style I like. The other one, I have a nerdy t-shirt. It shows the evolution of man, but at the end it shows a machine strangling a man in the.
That's right. I remember that one.
Because it's thought provoking,
like the Terminator. Squeezing the throat.
Because we are moving into that era where AI is starting to become more prevalent, and we're gonna have more automation. And again, those are things I like. I like shirts that aren't taking themselves too seriously, but are great conversation starters.
Yeah, I think, and I'm a t-shirt guy myself. I have to, I don't buy more than I do buy by a long shot, right? But the ones that are my favorite, and not so much science, but kind of atheist movement t-shirts, secularism t-shirts, are the ones that everybody won't get, but my people will get. Those are the ones that I like, and yours are a lot more mainstream than perhaps some of the secularist t-shirts. But
Oh,
there's
I
a
like those
significant.
too. Yeah, I like those too. You know, I have a lot of like fossil shirts, stuff that no, but the average person. But yeah, it's good to have those nerdy T-shirts that where people are like, what's your shirt say? And you can kind of, well, I'll tell you.
Yes, let's sit down and chat. So I'll remind you again when we get closer to closing, and we'll close in just a few minutes here to try to stay on track and to respect your time and our viewers' time. We'll ask you to get your links and plug them in the chat. But wanted you to talk a minute about funding for space science right now, kind of what your take is on that. Maybe just a quick nickel tour of your opinions on space science funding. And I know we've gone through an administration change recently. Not sure, I haven't followed the space science news, but tell us kind of how that's going, and if you want to tie into that, your opinion of the for-profit space market as well.
Yeah, so things are changing. It's not like it was back in the day where NASA is the only thing in the game in the United States. And first off, the European Space Agency is doing well. JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, China is a huge game changer when it comes. They're working on a mission in the moon. They've launched a lot of rovers. Actually, they're sending a rover to Mars right now. I think I was thinking of Hope. That was the United Arab Emirates has also sent a mission to Mars. So we're not the only ones in the game anymore. But back in the day when we, pretty much the United States is really the only thing, sending stuff up on a regular basis. The parts of the world are doing that. So I think now we're seeing a lot more international collaborations. With other organizations. For example, the James Webb Telescope will be launched by the Europeans in French Guyana down in South America. So that's good in a way because these big missions are very, very expensive. Artemis is definitely a very expensive mission, especially during a pandemic when people are more worried about how they're going to, live on a daily basis. They're not worried about sending a big rocket to Mars. So these private industries like SpaceX, Blue Origins, Sierra Nevada, these other companies coming in. SpaceX just won the bid for the lunar lander project for the Artemis mission. You're going to see a lot more of these private public funded things, which I think is good because the public funded stuff can kind of regulate and kind of, make sure that these people aren't just exploiting things, but the private industry can go off the back of these big space, like for example, SpaceX with the launching pads and stuff at Kennedy Space Center and all that. So it's a nice symbiotic relationship that's growing with. I like the symbiotic kind of sometimes has a connotation of being bad, but in this case, it's a good thing that they're working together for the greater good. So I think you're going to see less of these big major government funded projects and NASA being more of like the visionary and letting the smaller commercial programs kind of make all the work, do all the work basically.
Right. Kind of like we do with other infrastructure, right?
Right.
Where government may set kind of an agenda, but the contractors come in and get the work done. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, technically NASA's been doing that since the beginning. I mean, NASA never builds anything. It's contractors like United Launch Alliance and all these other companies, but they had more control over what they spent. Now these companies are actually the ones spending the money and building them, and then NASA is the one that's actually, Well, so there's more of that going on, I think, in the future. So this is exciting stuff. And again, as I said, it's not going to be United States. It's going to be other parts of the world that are going to be involved in this. I guarantee I wouldn't be surprised that when we actually have a true, honest to goodness Mars program, it's not going to be just the United States. It's going to be a team of international people getting together and doing this. So
yeah, no, it's getting closer to Star Trek.
Yes, and it's good. It's good, right? We're all, the same species, right? We should all work
except
together.
for the Klingons, I guess. But
yeah, right.
But I think it's interesting to think about kind of the evolution of marketing, the evolution of NASA, and I think that the tools that we use to talk about the space age that we've been in for years now have changed dramatically with television. I mean, the landing on the moon would have been much less important had it not been on film. You know what I mean? And of course, we had video at the time, and there's certainly some tie-ins to the advancements in electronics and all that. But in the last 20, 30 years, the ability, or I should say the last 10 years, the ability to see launches just one after the other, certainly, not manned or not, I don't know if you use the word staffed, I have to use the word manned, but unmanned missions, crewed missions, that's the word, CREWED, uncrewed missions that are testing, you see these going off, and it's like, if we had not watched the space race on TV, it would have been so much less interesting. We'd have had so much less passion. You probably would not be doing the job you do right now. So it's really made a big difference. Any launches that we should be looking out for in the next few weeks or months that are on your list?
There's actually Crew 2 that's going up next week on the 22nd at like 6 something a.m. I don't know the exact time. It's around 6 a.m. in the morning.
It'll be dark. That's good.
Yeah, and there it's an international collaboration. There's a French astronaut there, four crew members. And I hate to say it though, David, but actually I pitched this story to our college, and they were kind of like, so what's the big deal about this? And it's kind of like they did the first mission. Now after this, it's kind of like, okay, what's the big deal? So I think unfortunately, you did bring up a very good point that I like to say that because rockets are going up all the time, it's almost like watching airplanes go up anymore, where it's just like, okay, well, these aren't as big. But I think once Artemis starts, that's going to be the game changer. But I think these routine launches, unfortunately, they are going to become more mundane to the average person. They're going to be like, okay, so what, So, there's a friend of mine mentioned that astronaut in the next 100, 200 years is just going to be like a construction worker. It's just going to be a job that, you don't have all these requirements like you do now. It's going to be a lot more accessible, and it's going to be more mundane when, you're going to see more of them. It's an interesting transition we're going into. But the thing I like about it, though, is that I forget how many times, once I leave this little bubble of Central Florida, how little people actually know about the space program. We are very privileged to be in a place where we can see rockets go up in our backyard. Mm-hmm. But if you go out, even up into the northern panhandle, I've given programs up there in the panhandle, and they were like, I didn't even know NASA still was doing anything. Yeah. So it's really quick. It's really interesting to see how quick the view of the space program is depending upon your geographic location. So I think we have to even do a better job at letting people know what's the point of all this. And, so.
Well, the distance we can see launches is certainly a factor in there as well. I mean, you don't talk about the launches that are happening in your backyard if you're outside of the peninsula. I remember in Lake City 30 years ago that I would see launches of the shuttle. I remember seeing it in Sarasota, so outside of the large rockets going up, you can't see that far away. And I won't ask you to divulge your super places to go and watch launches, but if you had a recommendation for non-friends and family, where would you send us to go check out launches? So really,
actually, I'll tell you all a cool location.
Okay.
But this is
just between us.
Just between you all, yeah.
All
right. Over in Geneva, there's that road that goes to St. John's called Hatbill. Do you know what I'm talking about, Dave?
I remember talking about it with you, but I don't remember the name of it. Yeah.
I'll look it up once we're done here. I'll send a link. But that area is actually a great place to watch a launch. That's not super far away. But really, the best place to go is anywhere along Route 1. It doesn't even have to be in Titusville. It could be up in Edgewater, or just as long as you're kind of along the Mosquito Lagoon area, you'll have a great view of the launch. You don't want to
away from lights, away from trees, away from
the city. The lights aren't as much of an issue, but the trees, you want a nice clear horizon. Any beach, if you go to a beach. Really, you kind of the biggest thing, and this was actually a big concern for Crude 1 and Demo 2. The Max Brewer Bridge area is probably one of those places you don't want to go to, especially if you're trying to avoid crowds.
Yeah, exactly.
So just stay away from that area right near downtown Titusville, but anywhere kind of even a few miles north or south of that. Well, maybe south but north of that will be less busy. So I would recommend to kind of go a little bit further north on Route 1, away from all that.
And we can see your great launch photos at Instagram.
Yeah,
Is that the best place?
yeah.
Okay.
That's my hub, if you will, for all that. I do see a question about SpaceX satellites, which actually is I have an interview with a student this week about Starlinks, and actually, when for those that remember, you might have remembered Comet Neowise back in July of last year. I always forget that 2020 existed anymore. Um, but that was one of the silver linings of 2020 was we got to see this really amazing comet. And because it's in Florida in July, our amount of days to observe this thing are pretty much non-existent. But we
And
did
that's
have a
because of the
couple.
sun angle, right?
Well, not only that, but just our skies were just so humid, and you get those
Okay.
thundestorms in the evening, and then so you can
Okay.
do it in the early evening. But yeah, a lot of it too also is the fact that we're lower latitude, so it was only hot up a certain elevation. But there was a time when it was actually high enough where you could see it, and there was only 2 clear nights forecast. So I went out first night, hit home run, got an couple amazing shots. I was super happy. But then there was another clear night, and I was like, I'm going to do this one more time before it starts to fade away. So I did that, and there was a Starlink constellation going through. And I have an image. I'll have to kind of dig through it. I might be able to share it some other time, but I have an image showing the streaks of the satellites going through the comet images. And that was my first interaction with the Starlink satellites. The good news is that at least for visual astronomy, Starlink satellites have been installed these visor things over their antennas. But the antennas are the ones that are actually producing all the really bright light. But these new solar visors putting on are actually, the original ones were absorbing too much heat, but they actually put even the newer ones that are doing a pretty good job. And right now, I have been notified that Starlink's passed by. I was doing a couple of imaging sessions recently, and I didn't really notice them. So good news is when they get up to their certain elevation, now they have these visor things. I don't think we're going to have as much of an impact as we thought we were. The biggest impact of Starlinks is actually in radio astronomy because of the frequencies that they're generating. So I know certain observatories, radio astronomy observatories like the VLA and Green Bank and these other institutions are actually kind of like approving no transmission zone. So when these satellites pass over, they got to shut it off and then they turn it back on again. So that's hope. That's the hope, right? Because that's actually a huge problem, huge area of astronomy that's greatly impacted by that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think it's really hard. Humans have a hard time with large numbers, and that includes large spaces. When you think, as we did in the last 50 years, how likely is it that there's going to be any contact with anything, assuming everything stays intact, right? Explosions and other things, and certainly impact with objects will cause there to be a lot of pieces. And we see some of this in some movies, and it's really interesting to watch. But the likelihood of two things coming together on planet Earth, so much farther outside of the Earth, the sphere there, the layers, there's so much. There's depth, there's height, there's X, Y, and Z angles to try to keep things apart. But there's got to be a million things up there, including all the pieces of all the stuff that broke, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was actually part of Oasis, which is a science fiction writing conference before COVID started, and they actually did a panel, and I was part of the panel talking about space policy. And actually, there were 2 individuals. I can't remember their names right now, but there are 2 individuals that were amazing with worked on with government, with the United States government on adopting space policy. And right now, there's no real international policy on like what you can send up there. So right now, we can assume that SpaceX is cooperating. Amazon, they want to release their own. They're going to cooperate. But what about other countries who don't care? They're going to start launching stuff up, and we're not going to pay attention to that. So yeah, those are things that we have to, it's going to come to a point where we have to, as an international community, have to decide that you cannot launch something without the approval of the space consortium or something that will oversee, because like anything, you start throwing more and more people in the game, there's eventually, okay, we're going to have to make these rules now. So
right. Well, yeah, we're dealing with international policy on many levels like that, right? And it's really challenging. So Listen, we could talk for a lot more. I want to thank Manish for that last question. We are at well over time, but you've been very generous, Derek, with us today. If you don't mind, plug your stuff in the chat while I'm closing us out. Okay, we'll make sure we do that. So thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend and stay safe out there and get your vaccine.
Yeah, it was good to see you again. And you definitely have the lead in the number of appearances. So we're gonna start tracking that so we can keep you in the lead anytime anybody else gets close. But before we go, let's do some quick reminders. The next event that we're going to have is on May 2nd. I talked about this before. Just a quick reminder, that's at 2 p.m. So if you are going to make that event, let's watch that for 2 p.m. On May the 2nd. That's 2 weeks from 2 hours or an hour and 13 minutes ago, 2 hours and 13 minutes ago. Mark your calendars. We'll meet the leaders of the newly established Association of Secular Elected Officials, and we'll find out how we can make a difference for them and in turn for ourselves, whether it's running for office, engaging with candidates and elected officials, or getting active in party politics. I know some of you are already doing that, and you can support the mission of the ASEO as individuals and help grow the network of secular elected officials and the constituents supporting them. As a nonprofit organization, we can share this organization's information with you, but we're not going to be engaged in promoting those candidates because that would be a violation of the tax code. So in early 2016, there were only 10 legislators nationwide that were known to be publicly non-theists. And thanks to the efforts of the Center for Freethought Equality, the political and advocacy arm of the American Humanist Association, there are now more than 80 legislators at the federal, state, and local level who identify with the secular community, and scores more who ran for office but weren't able to win. We've got to increase our representation to eliminate the stigma of being openly non-theistic and to make sure that we have a seat at the table that impacts policy and including voicing our concerns when those things come up. So we're looking forward to that talk in just 2 weeks at 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, May 2nd.